Welcome everybody to our informative webinar on how to prepare for the CIA exam, of course, on how to pass the CIA exam. My name is Wada Halak. I'm a director here with PRC, and I'll be glad to take you on this short or hopefully short presentation. Now, of course, we are all here because we want to pass the CIA exam. So what does it take? Why do a lot of people complain about the exam being difficult or about them not succeeding from the first try? So I'll help you. What we'll do is we'll try to help you today to get it from your first attempt. Now, what's the first thing you need to do to pass this exam? You have to want it. I want to pass. I am going to pass. If you do not believe that you're going to pass, if you do not believe that you want it, or you just I want it, if you just want it passively, chances are you will not pass. You have to really want it, because once you want something, and we all know this, once we really want it, once we really need it, we will do everything we can to pass, and we will pass. But if you just say, oh, I'd like to have a CIA exam, or you're passive about it, or I'll study when I have the time, or this year I'm not free, I started a new job, then I started a new family, then I have some commitments now, this time of the year is usually busy, you have the holidays, you have blah, blah, you will never end up getting it. It's procrastination. So your first step probably is to stand in front of a mirror and say, I want to pass the CIA exam. I want to get it. So this is really your first step, because once there's a will, there will be a way. So the want it is your first step. This is step one. Now, step two is to know thy challenge. Know what you're taking yourself into. What is the CIA exam? The CIA exam is a three-part multiple choice question exam. So it's multiple choice questions, 3 parts. You can do them in any order. You can start with part 2, then do part 3, and then do part 1, or you can do part 3 first, part 1 first, any order you want. Do you have to study them all together? Likely not. However, we will give you a few hints about studying them after this. So it's a 3-part exam, multiple choice. Part 1 is 125 questions. Part 2 is 100 questions, and part 3 is 100 questions. Now, why is part 1 185 questions? Why do you have more questions on part 1? The way this works is that they need to test new questions before they implement them. New questions, not new materials. So they need to test them. So part 1 is where they test all their questions. So sometimes you might get questions from part 2 or part 3 tested on part 1. But if you do get these questions on part 1, you're lucky, because then you know these are the test questions. So you have 25 questions that do not go towards your final grade. So if you do not answer these 25 questions, you can still pass. However, you do not know which are the 25 test questions on part 1. That's why you have to answer all questions. Now, a hint on how to try to identify them, just so that you don't worry too much. Let's say you find you have a topic that you're expecting 1 or 2 or 3 questions on the exam, and suddenly you get 20 questions on that single topic on the exam. Our experience tells us that when they do test questions, they will test a single topic in a large number of questions. So for example, you're expecting 1 or 2 questions on control frameworks. If you find 20 questions on control frameworks, these are test questions, or most of these are test questions. Only 2 of these will count towards your final grade. The rest are test questions. Now, the other way you can find them out is that if you find questions on ratios in part 1, ratios is usually a part 3 topic. If you find questions on sampling in part 1, sampling is usually a part 2 topic. So if you find topics that are beyond what you covered in part 1, chances are these are the test questions. So your exam will be 3 parts, 2.5 hours for part 1, 2 hours for part 2, 2 hours for part 3, 125 questions for part 1, 100 questions for parts 2 and 3. Now, do you have to study them in order? You do not. Do you have to study more than one part before applying for the exam? You do not. However, from experience, from our previous experience, we believe that studying parts 1 and 2 concurrently will increase your chances of passing both parts. Now, the reason why this is the case is twofold. First, the body of knowledge, think of it like a bowl, like a piece of dough. When you divide it, when you cut it to 2 parts, it's not going to be a perfect straight cut between the topics. It's very difficult to say, oh, you know, this topic is strictly part 1, this topic strictly part 2. You will have some questions that may be covered from a certain aspect or from a certain angle in part 1, and they're covered from a different aspect or a different angle in part 2. And that's why my advice is that you study both parts together. The second reason why this is also true is that when you study both parts together, you will be solving the questions of both parts. And therefore, you will be exposed to a lot more multiple choice questions, and you will get a better grasp and better tips and techniques on how to answer and what to expect in the answer, and how do the examiners think when they put the questions. So my personal recommendation is that you study parts 1 and 2 together and part 3 separately. Now, of course, we do get feedback that, you know, that's too much information, that's too much knowledge, I can't take it. You might be right. However, parts 1 and 2, to start with, they're not that big, they're small. And the second reason is the knowledge in parts 1 and 2 does not require memorization. It does not require a lot of recollection. It requires you a lot of understanding with very minimal things that you might need to remember for the exam. Otherwise, it's understanding, it's the concept, how to do things, who does what, responsibilities, when are things done. And this just changes your way of thinking. So chances are, if you study part 1 and then move on to part 2, you will not forget part 1. In fact, it will emphasize the knowledge picked up in part 1. So my advice is that you study both parts 1 and 2 concurrently. Write the exams in any order. You can start with part 2 exam and then part 1, or part 1 and then part 2, and then move on to part 3, which is a separate ball game altogether. The overlap in topics is not significant between part 3 and the remaining 2 parts. Now, next will be the passing score. The passing score of the exam is 600. Now, some people say, okay, 250 to 750, that's a 500 difference, so 600 would be a 70% or whatever. This is actually not how it works. The CIA exam is a scaled score exam. What does a scaled score exam mean? It means that they measure your performance to the performance of others on the same difficulty level. In other words, if I happen to get a difficult exam, I might pass with a 68% correct, or maybe a 69% correct. If I happen to get an easy exam, I might need 72 or 73% to get the 600. So the 600 is a scaled score. It's not the same for every edition of the exam. What the examiners have, though, is that they do have statistics on prior versions, on prior editions. Once you get your version of the exam, they'll say, okay, this version of the exam, the difficulty level, you need a 69% to get a 600. So don't think about it in percentages, and don't try to quantify the 600 scaled score to percentages. However, those who score anywhere between 580 plus to 590 or sometimes 595, you guys are 2 to 3 questions away. Those who score in the 550 range, or 500 to 550, you are close, but not close enough. You do need a bit more work on understanding and on practicing solving more questions. If you get lower than 500, then you actually need to prepare again from scratch. You are not close to passing. Now, of course, if you get more than 600, it's just a pass. They will not give you a score. Now, next is studying and choosing the exam study materials. Of course, I'm here from PRC. We will be recommending our material. However, there are multiple approaches to studying. To start with, you can study using books. And for every exam outline, for every exam part, the IIA has a reading list of materials, of books that you can refer to for that particular part of the exam. So this is your first approach. I do not personally recommend that approach. It's too long, too tedious. You don't have to waste time on the source books. The second approach is the review material. Like our material, we provide review material, which is where we consolidate a lot of texts from various places, a lot of pieces of knowledge from various places, and put it in a way that covers probably 90 or 95% of your exam in smaller books. So if you want to study the entire body of knowledge, it'll be this big in papers. If you want to study from a review book, it'll be this big. So you save considerable amount of preparation for risking maximum 5, maybe less, maybe slightly more % of your exam. So we do strongly recommend that you go with a review course approach or review material approach. The other approach you can do is you can attend a live class. Now, of course, with the corona going around the world, probably live classes have shrunk or they are not offered as frequently as they used to. Your third option or final option would be an online review. Now, here also we do offer an online review, which we will talk about towards the end of the session. But we do recommend you go with the review and maybe a live course or an online review. Next, you need to plan. So now you said you want it, you know the exam, you know what to expect. You've decided on your course of options for your study and preparation material. Now, next, you need to plan your studying. Now, planning starts with setting a target date, a reasonable target date. A reasonable target date would be for somebody who has just started. So I'm not talking about somebody who's been in the process for the past few months or few years. For somebody who has just started, should be no less than 3 months and no more than 12 months. So you should target your exam or exams no less than 3 months. You do need 3 months of preparation time at least for the CIA. Now, of course, I do know some people who have done it in shorter period of time, but they were already fresh from university or they did a lot of practice and they were full-time studying, etc. But 3 months is like a bare minimum for the volume of material that you need to read and this volume of questions that you need to prepare. And 12 months is the maximum. This is not an MBA. This is not a PhD. This is not a sophisticated. This is a reasonably difficult exam, but it's not something that you need to spend a lifetime doing it or a decade doing it. Do not plan anything beyond 12 months. Try to target anywhere in between. So set the target date and expect to prepare around 600 hours for the 3 parts. Again, this is an average. I've seen people who have done it in less, and I've seen people who have done it in a longer time. I would expect around 150 hours for part 1, 150 hours for part 2, and maybe around 300 hours for part 3. Now, some people will do part 3 in less if they are very familiar with the topics. Some people might need slightly more time. But parts 1 and 2, I would expect around 150 hours between reading the books, solving the questions, reading the answers, whether you solve them correctly or incorrectly to all the questions you attempted, and re-attempting the questions you've solved incorrectly. Now, how does that materialize or how does that equal? I would say 20 hours per week is a fair time. Now, 20 hours per week is equivalent to almost 3 hours per day. Can people study on a daily basis for 3 hours? Probably not. You might do first day 3 hours, the second day 3 hours, then the third day you might not be able to do anything. You'll feel backlogged and it might make you panic. But I would set weekly targets. I would set weekly targets whereby I'd spend 20 hours during the week. It might be attending classes, it might be reading, it might be solving questions, maybe 2 hours during the week every day, and then make up the time over the weekend. You have to find the time. Now, back to our step one where you said you need it. Now, what's happening here? And I'm going to switch off the slide here for a minute. I want you to focus with me. Now, what's happening here is this. You are embarking on an endeavor where it's going to take you 600 hours of preparation time. Now, these 600 hours you did not have in the first place. None of you just sit there and procrastinate doing nothing for 600 hours throughout the year. You probably rest, watch TV, eat, socialize, work, family, etc. So you do not have 600 hours available for you. What you need to do is you need to squeeze in 600 hours into your already full schedule. So these 600 hours must take the place of something else you do. But always think of it as an investment. These will probably be the best, the wisest 600 hours you will spend in your career. Because once you get it, do it once, do it right, it will make a difference all your life. I am still reaping the rewards of my first investment when I did spend almost that many hours for my CPA exam. I still reap the rewards till now. Of course, at that time, I had to cut out my friends. I stopped working, or I was doing part-time work, and I camped for almost 4 months, spending these hours until I passed. But it was worth it, because I did it once, I did it right, and I didn't have to go procrastinate. I've seen people procrastinating over the CIA for 5 years, 7 years, 6 years. Don't do that. Don't be one of these guys. Put a target, allocate the hours, and set it a priority. Now, if you're not going to set it a priority, or you know you have other priorities, then my advice to you, don't start the process in the first place. And this is back to step one. If you really want it, this has to go to the top of your priority list. And you will have to cut out a few things they do every day. Now, the other way you can steal hours, and I quote unquote steal. Now, every minute counts. Every quarter of an hour counts. So what you can do is maybe if you have a lunch break at work, solve a few multiple choice questions. Now, for example, our platform, and I know a few others, allow you to do that from your cell phone. Just open up and solve a few questions. This counts towards your target. Open up and read a few flashcards. Open up and read a few pages. This counts towards your target. So if every day during the week you do 5 minutes or 10 minutes per hour, over a day you would have done like an hour or an hour and a half, and then an hour and a half in the evening after you get back from work or from school, or in the morning before you go to work, or on the train or on the commute. You would make up 2 hours during the day from bits and pieces, and then you'll make up the difference over the weekend. But 20 hours a week is a reasonable time. So having said that, if you divide 600 by 20, let's go back to the slides. So if you divide 600 by 20, we get 30 weeks. And this is back to almost 6 months of preparation, which is the fair time, or the fair average, let's put it this way. Not everybody will need 30 weeks, and not everybody can do it in 30 weeks. Some people might need a bit more, some people might need a bit less. Now we move on to preparation. What is the order of the preparation? My personal recommendation from experience, and I've been doing this for almost 22 years now. I've been helping people pass professional qualifications for 22 years now. I've done a few myself. So you need to read the book. I always recommend that no matter how much experience you have, read the book once. And the reason is, some of the questions, or for part one, a lot of the questions, they will tell you according to IIA guidance. In real life, it might be done differently. You might answer differently in real life, but the question is according to IIA guidance. So you will have to read the IIA guidance, because your question, your answers will be in accordance with the IIA guidance. So you would read the books and then practice the multiple choice questions. Of course, our material is divided into short study sessions, and for each study session, you have a dedicated section on of questions on your online platform. So that will make it manageable bites or manageable pieces to complete the big puzzle. So you'd read the book once. You might want to emphasize a few areas, reading them a second time before the exam. You might not, that's up to you. You would practice the multiple choice questions, and I would say at least practice them once. You would reattempt any questions you answered incorrectly in your previous attempts. And I cannot emphasize this enough. Actually, I'm going to switch off the screen to emphasize it. Now, the way our brains work, if we know something, we will know it. We will know it today. We will know it tomorrow. We will likely know it 10 years from now, because we already know it. It's engraved in our brains. If we answer something incorrectly, something we do not know, this is what we need to emphasize, because chances are this is what we will always keep getting wrong. And I'm sure you've seen this, you've encountered this, you encounter this every day. You'll say, oh, this time I'm going to do it the right way, I'm going to remember from my mistake, and you still do it wrong again. So you really need to emphasize and study and focus. You don't need to study evenly. If you do 100 questions, you get 20 wrong, you don't have to redo the 100 questions again. Of course, if you have the pleasure of time, do them. However, redo the questions that you're getting incorrectly at least. Now, how frequently do you need to do this? You have to give it a 1 week or 10-day cooling period between attempts. In other words, if I study today, it's a helpful habit to read the answers, the explanation of the answers to all the questions you're answering, whether you're answering correctly or incorrectly. But emphasize the questions that you're answering incorrectly and read the explanations to understand why the correct answer is correct and why your answer is incorrect. But don't reattempt these questions the following day or 2 days later or on the same day, because chances are you will still remember the answer, but not because you understood it, but because you remember the answer. So what we recommend is that you give it a cooling off period, maybe a week or 10 days before you reattempt the same session or these questions, whether you're answering them correctly or incorrectly. Now, on the second attempt, you have the choice. If you have plenty of time, you can redo all the questions. If you do not have plenty of time, at least answer the questions you're answering incorrectly. And all the platforms, including ours, will allow you to choose the questions that you've answered incorrectly in prior attempts. These are the questions you really need to emphasize. Back to the slides. Next, you might do a final review a few days before your exam. Do a quick review, a quick final review. And for part one, if you do have time, read the IIA's guidance, the practice advisories, the standards, etc. Read the full text. Now, in our material and all review courses, we take the important points, we take the summaries, we take the straight to the point material. However, if you do have time, it will not hurt, it might help to read as many practice advisories as you can. They're all on the website. Once you're enrolled in the IIA, you become members and you'll be able to access this guidance from your online account. do a final review, and you can try or attempt a mock exam a few days before your exam. Also, our system will allow you to generate random questions, put you under exam conditions. It will not show you the correct answer at the end of each question. It will accumulate them until you finish the exam, then it will show your results at the end. So it will do a mock exam, and hopefully that would be a good measure of your success. Now, how much do you need to score on a mock exam to have good chances of passing? More than 90%. And I'm sure some of you are like, 90%. And the reason is this. The mock exam is from the body of knowledge that has already been disclosed or released by the IIA. The mock exam is from questions you have already seen and you are already familiar with. You've already seen the answers, you've already read the answers. So you have to score 90%. So if you've seen a question before and you read the answer and you saw it on a mock exam, you still cannot answer it correctly, chances are you still have not understood the approach, and therefore you will not likely answer correctly on the real exam, which are new questions, new topics. But if you do understand the topics, and for this to count, for the 90% or for the mock exam to count, remember my previous note. You have to have left, or you have to have not memorized the questions. So you'd have had to study over weeks or 10 days between attempts, so that you know the answer, but you have not memorized the answer. Now, study approach, how to approach study. To start with, positivity is a very important aspect. Always be positive. Don't listen to your peers. Don't listen to your friends. Don't listen to your colleagues. I'm going to tell you here a short experience from my exam, my first exam, which was the CPA back in the days. Every time somebody asks me, what are you up to? And I'm like, oh, I'm preparing for the CPA exam. Are you crazy? What are you thinking? Who do you think you are? So-and-so guy was the highest GPA in class, failed the exam. So-and-so professor went for the exam, passed 2 parts, failed 2 parts. So-and-so studied like hell and did not pass. So who do you think yourself? Do you think you're gonna pass? Don't listen to these people. You will pass. And why will you pass? Because you want to pass, because you want it. This was your step 1. You really want it. And if you really want it, you will pass. So do not listen to others. Do not get any negative feelings or any negative any vibes from your peers. Focus on passing, and you will pass. If I could pass, each and every one of you could pass. So, short study sessions. Do not spend 6-7 hours studying. Nobody in their right mind can spend 6-7 hours studying effectively. Effective studying requires a short period of study, maybe up to 2 hours, and then you need to reward yourself with breaks. And you need to take your mind away from the books, do something else, watch TV, go out for a walk, cook a meal, do whatever you want. And then you can come back and do another short session. The way our brains work is that we have topics that need time to assimilate. Now, the second is that all topics are equally important. Back in college, back in the days, we used to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to skip this chapter. You know, hopefully we will not get any questions from this chapter. Unfortunately, on the CIA, each and every single page has an equal chance of showing up on your exam and the allocated percentage. Focus on your weaknesses. Oops, sorry. We should go back to the slide. Focus on your weaknesses. So only you know what areas you're weak at. Only you know what areas you're not comfortable with. And these are the areas you need to focus on. You don't need to study evenly. You don't need to study in order. You need to start with the weakest areas you have and move on. If an area you're scoring 90% from your first attempt, you can skip that area. You don't need to go back to it unless you absolutely have time. But you might study an area where you're scoring 50 or 60%, you might study that area 3 or 4 times. So don't study equally and focus on your areas of weakness. Again, stay positive. Cannot emphasize this enough. Always stay positive. Even if, God forbid, you attempt the exam and you didn't go well the first time, stay positive. You could make it. You will make it. Sometimes it takes people 2 or 3 attempts, but you will make it. Avoid negative peers. We already covered that. And rest and reward. Reward yourself and rest. It's not about studying. Don't just go study, 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 study. It doesn't work like that. This could work for your university exam. 2 or 3 days before your exam, you'd cram the material into your brain and go attempt the exam. This will not work for the CIA. The CIA should change the way you think, should change your approach to problems or cases that you might encounter. Before the exam, review and rest. Resting is a very important aspect of the exam. 50% of any exam is material, but the other 50% is how you approach it. So resting is a very important step you need to take to pass the exam. Don't study, I mean, the last page you read a day before your exam might get you 1 point, might or might not, but it might make you lose 40 questions because you were tired and you couldn't focus. So try to rest, sleep. If you're working, you might want to consider 1 or 2 days off before your exam and just relax and go for your exam. Now, the CIA exam. Now we've prepared and now we want to sit for the exam. We have our preferred exam answering technique. Tested, proven, it works. Now, the first step is the multi-pass approach. In a multi-pass approach, you will not approach the exam equally. You will look at your first question. If it's long and or it looks difficult, you know, just from the looks of it, you're familiar with these kinds of questions because you're prepared, you've studied, you know what a question will ask probably. If you see the word leases and you don't like leases, ignore it. If you see a formula, if you see a chart with numbers, and ignore it. So do not spend a single second on the question, just go next. You see another long and or difficult question, next. Keep going next, next, next until you find a short and or easy question and start there. It's like picking apples from a tree. You can get 50 or 60 apples from the lower branches, while it might take you the same time to get 10 apples from the higher branches. You need to step on a ladder, climb up, and get that big, shiny red apple. I don't want that red, shiny apple. I want the easily accessible points. A short, easy question will have the same grade as a long, difficult question on the exam. My task is to get the 75% correct. So I don't care about these long, difficult questions. I want to get the easy questions correct. And why does this approach work? So first, let's go with the approach. So you get to the end of the exam, and you would likely have solved 40 to 50 or maybe more of the short questions, and maybe 50 to 60 questions in the first 30 minutes. And then you would do another approach, and you would solve maybe in the first 1 hour. And then the second hour, you will do the 30 to 40 questions. And then maybe you will need, sorry, no, it doesn't work like this. Sorry. Let's divide it nicer. So maybe you will do 30 to or 40 to 50 questions in the first 30 minutes. 30 to 40 questions in the next 30 minutes. And then you will probably have 20 to 30 questions where you could spend an hour. You have 1 hour, and here we're assuming a 100 question exam. So the first half an hour will get you 50 points. And these are the short, easy questions. So chances are you will get them correctly. And you will get an easy 45 or 50% of your exam grade from the first half hour. And then you will spend another 30 minutes on the slightly longer or more difficult questions. And then you will have a whole hour for these 20 to 30 questions. So the way this will work is that you will skip until you find a short, easy question. You answer it, you move on to the next, you answer it, long, skip it, short, easy, answer it until you get to the end of the exam. Once you get to the end of the exam, you'll have 4 options. Option 1 is to view all questions. Option 2 is to see unanswered questions. Option 3 is to see marked questions, and option 4 is to end the exam. I don't want to end the exam yet, and I don't want to see all questions, and I haven't marked questions yet. I want to see the unanswered questions. So you will start again from the beginning and then move forward. Do not also answer all the questions again. Select the more difficult and or the longer questions. You get to the end and you start over. Personally, when I did these exams, I went beginning to end maybe 5 or 6 times. And for this approach to work, you should not read the question. If you start reading a question, finish it. So if you start reading the question and halfway through the question you find this is a difficult question, do not stop. You already wasted time on it. Finish it. But my recommendation, do not attempt to read it unless it looks short and it looks easy. Now, does this system work? Guaranteed it does. What are the pitfalls? What are the problems if you do not follow this approach? If you do not follow this approach, you might get the first 20 questions. Look at this scenario, and this is a possible scenario. 20 to 30 questions are the first 20 to 30 questions of your exam. And they need 1 hour. These are the long questions where you need analysis, you need to read, you need to think. They need 1 hour. They require 1 hour. So 1 hour or halfway through the exam, you will realize that you have only answered 30 questions and you still have 70 questions to finish. What will happen to you? You will panic. You might black out. You will start cramming through the remaining 70 questions without thinking because you're in a hurry and you will not get them correctly. Moreover, these are the 20 or 30 long, difficult questions. So if they're long and difficult, chances are you have a higher chance of getting them wrong. So these questions, you have a 90% chance of getting them correctly. These questions, you probably have an 80% chance of getting them correctly. These questions, you might have a 50% chance of getting them correctly. So if you multiply the 90 by the 50, that's a 45. You multiply the 80 by the 30, that's a 24. You add them up, you have a 69, almost a pass. So I don't need the last 20, 30 questions. And guess what? Examiners do not like it when I say this. It worked for me. I'm not going to say the certificate, but on one of the exams, out of 100 questions, I had 20 to 30 long or difficult questions. A third of the time, I completed the remaining questions, and I had a lot of time to focus on these long, difficult questions, but I couldn't be bothered. I just guessed them all. I just put A or B or C or D on all of them. Just a single letter, A on all of them, B on all of them, C on all of them, or D on all of them. And I ended the exam and I passed. And I did this for multiple parts. Now, why does this work? Why did it work for me? Why will it work for you? Because you collected your apples, you collected your grades on these short questions, on these easy questions. You filled your basket with the easy apples, and you did not waste time on that difficult apple, which you may fall off and break your neck, God forbid. So do the multiple pass approach. So if you have 40 to 50 in 30 minutes, 30 to 40 in another 30 minutes, and 20 to 30 in the remaining 1 hour, 90% for, I mean, this is where we did the math, 90% of the first 50, 80% of the second 30, and 50% of the last, you get 45, 24, and last 10 you will likely pass. Definitely apply this approach on your exam. And just remember, if you read a question, if you start reading a question, finish it. Don't wait. You already wasted time. Don't say, oh, I'll come back to it. Now, second exam technique, read all options. Because sometimes you read a question and you read A and you find, oh, A looks like a nice answer. I'll circle A and I'll move on. I need the time. You read the second option, you say, oh my God, the second option is also correct. You read the third option, you find the third option is also correct. And then you go back to the question and say, which of the following, all of the following are correct, except you did not notice the word except. The other chance is, which of the following is the best approach? Now, a lot of these approaches might be correct, but the examiner is asking you for the best approach. So the only way you can minimize mistakes here is to read all the options. Emphasize keywords. Now, in the good old days when we used to do paper-based exams, we used to circle words like not, except, least, most, just to emphasize them. Nowadays, of course, it's computer-based. You cannot circle on the screen. You can, but I'm not sure how they'll let you back into the exam room after that. So emphasize them. Whenever you read the word except, not, least, most, let it click. Fourth technique, duplicates are wrong. If you get two answer choices that mean the same thing, they must be both wrong. And I'll give you an example, especially for those of you who are accountants, and for those of you who are not accountants or are not very familiar with accounting, hopefully you can see what I mean once you start the accounting process. Now, a question might be, unearned revenues are classified as. And unearned revenues are times when the customers pay you and you still have not provided the goods or the services. They're usually a liability on your books. So if your first option is an asset, and your second option is a current asset, and your third option is a liability, and your fourth option is an equity, and let's assume we have no clue what it is. It cannot be neither A nor B. It cannot be an asset and a current asset, because an asset can be a current asset, and a current asset is an asset. So they're both wrong. So when you see two answers that give the same meaning or imply the same thing, chances are they are both wrong. Next, guess. Now, some exams, you get penalized for answering incorrectly. The CIA does not penalize you for incorrect answers. So guess. When you have to, when you're stuck, when you're not sure, give it your best guess. And if you absolutely have to, just put any answer. Just so you say, you know what, this answer looks nice, circle it. Or click it in this case. Next, do not change your answers. And here I'm going to switch off the screen and focus with me. 90% of us, in 90% of the times, we change from a correct answer to an incorrect answer. Now, some of us like to reread the questions after we finish the exam. We still have some time, we can go back to them, or we might, throughout the exam, we might have marked questions, because you do have the option to mark a question and come back to it. So you might have marked questions, and then when you come back to them, you change your answer, you change your initial answer. And my recommendation here is, unless you are 100% sure that you answered incorrectly the first time, do not change your answer. I learned this the hard way. Back in college, I used to help people around me. People used to, you know, I did not mind if they saw my answers. So in one of the exams, was actually my last exam in university, I solved my paper and my friend next to me started taking the answers off my paper. And he submitted his exam and left the room. The second, after he left, I reread a few questions and I changed some answers. So another friend saw them and he changed the answers to what I changed, and he submitted his paper and he left. When it was my time to, after the second guy left, I changed a few more answers, I submitted my paper and I left. So the first guy got 98, the second guy got 92, I got 88. And that's where I learned the lesson. Never change questions. Your first intuition, your first answer is most of the times the correct answer. So if you're not sure, keep it with your first intuition. And finally, stay positive. Also during your exam, you might see questions you were stuck at. You might see some difficult questions. Keep your positive attitude. Keep the smile. It will work. Now, solving by elimination is another technique. Now, for those of you who have attempted the exam, you would see, you know what I'm talking about. You will have a lot of these questions where you have 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the answers are usually a combination of the 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, in these questions, we are doing a timed exam. We want to save time. I like to follow the following technique. Once you see one of these questions, of course, if in your first attempt, you skip it. In your second attempt, you might still skip it. In your third attempt, in your third pass, now let's start solving the question. We start from the bottom. We don't read the question. I don't care what the question says. We say, which of the following is a number? And we count the number of ones. We count so we have 1 repeated 3 times, 2 repeated 3 times, 3 repeated twice, and 4 repeated twice. So we do a statistics of the repetitions in the answers, and we select for our starting point the one that's repeated twice. So in this case, the 3 was repeated twice and the 4 was repeated twice. Let's randomly start with 3. Which of the following is a number? And I will immediately, I will immediately jump to 3. Is 3 a number? 3 is a letter, so 3 is incorrect. I go back to the answers and I will cross out the answers where 3 is there. The reason why we select one that's repeated twice, because it will definitely eliminate 2 options for us. In this case, 3 was incorrect. So B and C are incorrect. Now we are comparing, the answer must be either A or D. Joint between A and D is 1 and 2. So 1 and 2 are correct without even reading them. I don't have to read them. I only have to read 4 now. If 4 is a number and 4 is a number, of course, unless we're in a philosophy class and some people believe 0 is not a number, the answer is D. If 4 is incorrect, the answer is A. So we answered this question by only reading 2 of the top options. We did not have to read all 4. Now, of course, this is a simple question where you only have 1 digit or 2 digits. But some of these questions can be a whole paragraph in each one of these. And reading them will take you 10 to 20 seconds and you might get mixed up. So why waste the time? If you could save 20 or 30 seconds on each and every one of these questions, and you have 20 to 30 questions of these on your exam, you might be able to save 10 or 15 minutes from using this technique. And for those of you who did attempt your exam, you do know that the time is precious. You do need every minute. Let's repeat the technique using 4 as our first attempt. So this time we're going to start with number 4. 4 is a number, so we can eliminate A and B. Now there is nothing joint or common between C and D, only 4. So now we only have to read any one of the other 3. So we read 1. 1 is a number, the answer is D. So any way you start, as long as you start with the one that's repeated twice, you will be able to answer these questions by only reading 2 of the 4 options. So this is a more complicated one. Which of the following equals 100? So we count the 1s, we count the 2s, we count the 3s, we count the 4s. We can start with 3 and 4. 4 looks easier. 9 plus 9 is 18, plus 3 is 21. So it's not a 0 with a remainder. For 100, we need a 0 with a remainder. So 4 is wrong. Common between A and B are 1 and 2. So 1 and 2 are correct. Now we only have to read 3. 10 plus 52 is 62, plus 24 is 86, plus 16 is 102. So 3 is wrong. The answer is A. So we answered A without having to go through this long, tedious calculations for 1 and 2. So do not always with a straightforward approach, be the one to work. Sometimes it's working backwards that works. So guys, all the best. If anything me or my colleagues can do to help you, please, you can reach out to us, and we will see you hopefully in future webinars in the near future. Stay safe and have a nice and pleasant evening.